Hey squad, what's going on? Rich Ryan here, bringing you another video about some Hyrox and hybrid training. Today we are talking specifically about the SkiErg. We're going to go through some different form tips and some different pacing and training things you can do to make sure that the SkiErg doesn't cost you your race at Hyrox. So before we get into it, hit me with a like and subscribe so you can get all of this type of content coming your way. And we start talking about more Hyrox stuff, some more deck fit things. We want to make sure you're seeing it. So, and also drop me a comment for what you want to see, what station is giving you the most problems for these, so we can kind of do a deep dive on those as well. All right, let's get into the SkiErg. So generally speaking, the SkiErg cannot win you a Hyrox event, but it can start you down the path of losing it. It's so early in the race that going overboard or having improper form can really cost you a lot of time. So we're going to kind of really talk about the form piece first, and then we're going to do a deep dive on how you should train for it and really what to do going into the race and what that should look like. So the SkiErg in general, it's kind of an interesting piece of equipment because it's not really, it doesn't mimic the demands of cross-country skiing as much as, say, the row-erg does in rowing. It's kind of its own standalone piece of fitness equipment, which is great for us, the fitness community, and for these races, but there's not really an authority figure on how to do these things because it's not really like cross-country skiing that much. So the form pieces are kind of all over the place. So we want to give you a couple of cues here to make sure that you're not blowing yourself up, because that's the thing with the SkiErg, is that you could, when your form is bad, your pace goes slower and your energy demands rise. So you die quicker while going slower. So it's really a double whammy for that. So making sure you have a couple of key elements in place will be really helpful for the race. So one of the first things that you really want to focus on in this is hinging your hips back. So you want your hips to come back first and not necessarily down like in a squat. So think of it more of like the starting position in a deadlift or when you're coming out of the squat. This is an interesting position because it's not something we train that much. We mostly train on opening the hips. Like we'll start in a deadlift position and then open the hips up, or in the squat, we're in a squatting position and we open our hips to, they are closed and then they become open. So we don't really train the closing or the snapping close of our hips that much unless you're doing ab work like toes to bar or GHC sit-ups. And even then it's kind of weird because you're suspended. Your feet aren't grounded. The only thing that I can really think of that mimics this that much is a kettlebell swing. So when you're doing a kettlebell swing, you want to make sure you fire your hips as they come up and you pull the weight down as hard as you possibly can to snap those hips closed as well. So that's going to be the thing that mimics the SkiErg the most in training. So again, hips go back first. And then you want to work on leaning your chest into the handles. So as your hips go back, then your chest needs to come forward. So those are the first two elements in it. So you want to really drive that chest through your arms and follow it to the ground there. And the final piece is then the snapping of your arms. So as you come all the way through it, you're going to snap it all the way closed. So the arms are really the last part of this puzzle that you want to put together. It's not arms first, it's hips, chest, arms. So if you want to sequence it even while you're doing it in training, that's a good way to kind of cue yourself. Hips, chest, arms. Hips, chest, arms, and just kind of sequence your way through this verbally to make sure you're doing it right. So let's take a look at some slow. So let's look at the SkiErg motion in a slow motion. So you can see as we're coming down, the first movement is those hips go back. So here it's pretty subtle, but you can see it is back first, and then that chest comes down second. So that's the position you want to be in. You'll notice here that the arms are still bent and really at my head here. They haven't really moved that much at all until I get to the final position of the ski, and that's when you finish all the way through. And one thing you'll see now is the recovery piece. So my chest is coming up even before my arms finish, and that's going to really help open up the blood pathway so I'm not like really closed off at that bottom position. If you ever felt really pumped after your SkiErg, that's probably why you're not opening up your chest at the top. So again, you'll see as you come down, your butt goes back, chest comes down, arms stay bent, and then finishing through. And then here's a look at some regular speed on that. So the SkiErg, once you get your form down, you should really practice that. It's one of those things that's probably not going to get better instantly. It's going to help with your energy initially, but the power that you're generating might not be the same as when you were doing it mostly arms. And that's one of the biggest pieces here, is that it feels like you want to pull it down, like it's a pull-up. It's not a pull-up. It is a hip and core movement, not an arm movement. So it's really easy to get pulling first, much like on the rower, where we really tend to pull our arms before we finish and open up our hips. But same as the rower, arms are the last thing here. In terms of muscle groups, your hips, your core, your torso is going to be able to generate more power than just your arms. So we don't want to use that first, and then you're going to lose the whole connection to the machine and the whole movement. So keeping those arms slightly bent, but not starting with a bend. That's another thing to notice, is that it's not straight arm into bent, it's bent arm into hips back. That's how you want to start each and every one of these strokes for that. So practice the form. This is really a quick dive on it, but this is the best way to kind of take a look at the form in general. So when you're doing it in training, one thing that I like to do is test a 2K. Once you have an idea where your 2K pace is, then you can figure out where you should be for your Hyrox race. I like something like 4 to 6 seconds per 500 slower than what your maximum 2K is. And that's the same on the row as well. So seeing where your 2K is and then adjusting by adding some time on per 500. And that should be a pretty decent spot for your Hyrox pacing. Again, this should feel kind of easy. It's the first station. You shouldn't go crazy on it. For the damper setting, it should be probably one notch below what your damper setting is for the rower. So I suggest something around 5 or 6. And this is going to depend on your size and how much power you can really put out on this thing. But in general, I think 5 and 6 is a really good sweet spot on here to keep the fan wheel going. And in terms of strokes per minute for a Hyrox race, this is really going to depend on where you are as an athlete and, again, how much power you can generate. Anywhere between 35 and 45 strokes per minute is probably going to be a good place for you to aim during your race. It's not going to take you over the top, and you want to work on that cadence piece so that you have a good idea of how it feels and how you're able to recover through it. So that's really going to be personal preference. Again, it depends on your height, your weight, how much power you can generate versus how many strokes you can do. If you can put out more power, you're going to want to do less strokes per minute so you have more time to recover in between each stroke. So one thing that I like to do in my training, and I encourage the athletes that I coach to do, is to do a 1,500 meter ski buy-in when we do our Hyrox tempos. So if you're doing Hyrox specific work, there's not a ton of room to stick this in like the middle. I mean, it kind of could help to do like a ski 30 minutes into your tempo, but really not. You should really just kind of start with it and just kind of leave it. But putting it at a longer time domain in the beginning of the workout is helpful just for pacing aspects. Like if you have to do a 1,500 or a 2K in the beginning of a 60-minute workout, you're not going to crush it. Where in a race, you're probably going to go too hard too soon. So practicing doing a little bit longer to give you a good sense of where you should be during the race is really helpful. And just figuring out, and then also running in and out of it. That's the only thing that I would recommend. And then also just doing ski-specific aerobic work. I would spend a lot of time on the SkiErg, making sure your form gets down, making sure those patterns are wired appropriately, and to build those aerobic pathways through the specific areas of the SkiErg, like your core, your arms, places that you might not typically get in with running or rowing or like biking type of thing. So spending time on this is important. It can really help boost your aerobic capacity, but doing it very specifically. So I wouldn't do a ton of work on this. I would just do a lot of easy work and then maybe some work with your Hyrox specific stuff. If you have a lot of time in your off season, maybe working at some up-tempo pace pieces for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that threshold range could be helpful. But how race specific it's going to be and how big of a part of this race it is, it's not that much. So you don't really need to crank on it unless it is a huge glaring weakness that you have. You don't need to spend a ton of time on it. For the most part, the pacing is what's going to matter the most. So spending time on here, learning where your pacing should be and making sure you nail that during your Hyrox event. It should feel kind of easy. You shouldn't go hard at this point. It's not going to do enough for you unless you are at the highest end of a Hyrox competitor, and that's where you need to make your time a little bit faster. Most likely, you're going to be able to make up more time on the sled, on the lunges, on the wall balls. Those are the things that really take up a lot of time for athletes. This isn't going to be that much. Even if you improve your pace per 500 by 2 seconds, you're going to gain 5 seconds of time on this. And how that's worth the energy you're going to put out, it's not we're not sure. But you want to make sure everything's dialed in so you don't kill yourself on this thing, because that's what it does. It's a trap. It's set there for you to go too hard too soon, and if you don't have the proper form, you're going to blow yourself up for the upcoming events. Cool, so I hope this was helpful. Again, hit me with a like, hit me with a subscribe so you can get all of the upcoming hybrid content coming your way. If you have a station that you're having a problem with, drop it down below so we can get a video up on that. If you haven't checked out the group training here at Reinforced Running, you can get a 7-day free trial where we take you through 7 days of training with some testing in there as well. We'll have specific ski workouts in there, specific Hyrox workouts in there, and we're able to build out a 8 to 10 week build and peak for your specific goal race. And then the rest of it is more just general strengthening and base building that will help you get as prepared as possible. So check that out. Free 7-day trial down below, $29 per month after that. Cool. I'll talk to you soon.